how so many difficult symptoms could be caused in the body. Once we have the chronic sympathetic arousal, all of the symptoms, I believe, can be explained by this hyperarousal. So, this sympathetic nervous system response, this anxiety response, is supposed to only be for 1 or 2 minutes at a time. But if that sympathetic response is continuous and chronic, all the energy gets used up instantly. The energy just goes. Like a short circuit in a battery. The short circuit, all the energy just goes. And that nervous system is keeping all the muscles ready for action. And if the muscles are kept in that readiness for too long and tensed and stressed, that contributes to the lactic acid buildup, to the pain in the legs and the muscles and the joints, all that pain that is there. And so the pain is real in the body, but then those signals get magnified back into the brain, making it feel like there is intense pain throughout the body. And that second one there, the immune system. We know that when the nervous system is overstimulated, the effectiveness of the immune system goes down. And so earlier on, we heard about XMRV. We know that in the patients certainly with CFS, there are many opportunistic viruses which are in the body. And that is because when the immune system is lowered, whatever is a local virus in that region, a background virus, will tend to be in the blood of those patients. We also know in studies that if somebody can't sleep and have deep sleep at night, they don't have that deep delta wave sleep, that is often caused by the amygdala being alert. So in brain scans of people who don't sleep deeply, they find the amygdala is on high alert. And when someone doesn't sleep deeply and doesn't have that, those different cycles of sleep, the next day they have more pain. And because there's a magnification once again of the pain signals. And with the brain fog, because the brain is hyperstimulated, a person finds it very difficult to think about other things because of the hyperstimulation. And we know that with hyperstimulation, there can be cognitive difficulties, difficulties thinking, difficulties with memory, and many other symptoms. Now, just coming back to the symptoms again. There are many other symptoms which are unique to each patient. So if you take 2 patients with fibromyalgia, you'll find that their symptoms will all be slightly different. And I believe that this is because fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome and other related illnesses, we are trying to categorize people to say, right, you have fibromyalgia because you have attained these criteria, and you have chronic fatigue syndrome because you have these criteria. Actually, the core problem is the hyperarousal of the sympathetic nervous system and the centralized brain sensitivity. And the symptoms will be unique to each person depending on their own vulnerabilities. It could be genetic vulnerabilities, psychological vulnerabilities, bodily vulnerabilities. So really, all of these illnesses are what I call amygdala-conditioned syndromes, including irritable bowel syndrome as well. Now, going deep in the unconscious brain. It is automatic. We have no control over it. And we often find, for instance, some patients find that they have a lot of signals of pain continually coming into the brain that creates a lot of suffering, continuous suffering. And that cycle which I described is unconscious and it's going around and around. And so what's changed before the illness and after the illness is that the amygdala has become traumatized. There is a trauma in the brain, in the amygdala, and then it stimulates the rest of the brain to make all the pain signals magnified. And we can feel completely helpless as these signals are coming. Now, the good news. The good news is that I certainly believe that that part of the brain which is not under our control, we can regain control over that process. Right? So what amygdala retraining is techniques to control that unconscious part of our brain using the outer cortex. And in studies on rats, what they found is that the amygdala is going alert, 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 danger, danger, all the time. So when it feels the pain signals, for instance, it is constantly sending out that danger signal, creating a loop. And in rats, they found that there is a neuron which connects from the cortex, so the prefrontal cortex. The neuron connects to the amygdala, so that when the amygdala wants to say, danger, danger, it says, stop. Danger, danger, stop. Danger, danger, stop. And if you retrain the brain enough times, then the sympathetic nervous system begins to calm down. As an example, many patients find that certain relaxation techniques and yoga and breathing maybe doesn't get rid of the pain, but it lowers the experience of the pain. And in this condition, essentially, the anxiety neurons and the worry neurons have got tied together with the pain neurons. So if you experience any worry or stress and anxiety, the pain signals fire. And if you experience any pain, and that's sensations, any sensations in the body, any symptoms, then the anxiety neurons fire. They become tied together in the conditioning. Now, amygdala retraining involves certain techniques to train our brain to stop that overactive response. And I spent the last 10 years refining these therapies so that they apply specifically to fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. Because there are many techniques out there that say that you can retrain your brain. But we know that with fibromyalgia, that the conditioning is so deep in the brain that it requires very, very powerful techniques to get the brain to unlock this trauma, to change this in the brain. And so these techniques are a number of different techniques that are very different to CBT. So it's not CBT. I would describe it like learning to drive a car. So when you first go to the lesson to drive the car, you have to think about the accelerator and the brake and the steering wheel. But if you have enough lessons, then 3 or 6 months later, you can drive down the motorway, eating a sandwich and speaking on your phone, even though it's illegal, and you can do all these things. Because you've trained your brain to automate a response. And in fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, I believe the brain has become trained to respond to the signals from the body and to magnify and get caught in that cycle. And these techniques are to break that cycle so that health can come back to the body. And so, initially the treatment was only available at my clinic, but we've now translated the treatment into Hebrew, and it's available as a home study course, and there's information in the leaflets that are around. And what the next steps of this treatment are really to have more and more trials and more refinements to the technique, so we can make these techniques more and more powerful. And these techniques do require commitment. Because as you can imagine, if somebody has fibromyalgia for 10, 20, 30 years, that cycle has been continuous. And in my mind, this is why when we take pain medicine, it will have a small effect, but all it is doing is trying to dampen the signals, and when it dampens the signals, all the amygdala and the rest of the brain do is try to increase the signals, because it wants you to be alert to the data it receives. But as we know, the brain can make mistakes, and the brain can overprotect us. And so fibromyalgia and these different illnesses is when the brain is trying to overprotect us. It is a physiological overprotection response, just like anxiety is a psychological overprotective response. And we've only just introduced the treatment to Israel, and we had a workshop with patients last week, and we had some good stories from patients some of them had made 50 to 60% recovery, some of them 80, 90% recovery, and Karen, who's organised a lot of my trip here to Israel, she's also someone that's made full recovery, and you can chat to her in the break about her experiences of using this treatment as well. How long was she using the treatments? Okay.
זה עובד? כן? מלחיץ. אני למדתי את הטכניקה תוך 2.5 אצל אשוק בלונדון. תוך 2.5 הייתי אצלו בלונדון, זה היה לפני שזה היה ב-DVD, ואז תרגלתי במשך שבוע, והרבה פעמים במשך הימים הראשונים הייתי צריכה לעשות את זה. בשבילי, תוך שבוע המוח התחיל ללמוד להגיב בצורה אחרת. אני חושבת שזה עזר לי שכבר עשיתי יוגה ומדיטציה, אז כבר הייתי במצב יותר גרוע, אבל זה לוקח זמן אחר לכל אחד, תלוי במצב שלו. בשבילי, כמו שאני אומרת, זה לקח שבוע, אבל אני הייתי צריכה לעבוד על זה חזק. אבל זה היה לפני 5 שנים, ומה שאני רוצה אפשר להוסיף משהו? אפשר להגיד משהו? שפשוט זה משהו זה משהו שמשתמשים בו, וזה לא שאחר כך אפשר לשכוח מזה לגמרי.